Cult leaders are usually charming individuals who are able to manipulate their followers into doing their bidding, either by false promises of salvation or by appealing to their specific vulnerabilities. It's also very often the case that these cult leaders have a history steeped in the criminal world. Number 5. Kong Hee was born in Singapore in 1964, and by the time he turned 11 years old, he was a member of the Marine Parade Christian Center in eastern Singapore. At age 21, he started studying his Bachelor's of Science degree at the National University of Singapore, focusing on computer and informational sciences. While he was at university, he found part-time employment at the Chapel of the Resurrection, helping to establish a new congregation called the Orchard Christian Center. Upon completing his studies in 1988, he worked as a programmer at a small publishing house. The following year, Kong relocated to the Philippines where he worked with Reverend Randy Singh as an evangelist. During this time, with support of senior pastors, he was given the opportunity to establish a new church in Singapore, and he traveled back to his home country where the City Harvest Church was created. From this time up until 2010, Kong served as an executive director and board member of various religious institutions, and he co-owned 2 companies with his wife, Sun Ho. By this time, the City Harvest Church had over 23,000 congregation members in 5 countries. In the year 2000, Kong's wife, Sun Ho, began a career as a singer, but it was a shaky start as her dress style and lyrics were considered to be inappropriate given her background. Then in 2003, a member of the church wrote to an English newspaper in Singapore stating that the congregation members were being urged to purchase Sun Ho's records, and that he was concerned that her career was being funded by the church. Following pressure from the church, Kay was forced to issue an apology and retract his statements, but in 2010, an investigation was launched against 17 people connected to the church by the Office of the Commissioner of Charities and the Commercial Affairs Department. The investigation went on for 2 years, after which Kong and 4 others were charged after it was found that $23 million was indeed used to finance Sun Ho's singing career. It was also found that Kong hid these transactions, among many others, from stakeholders, and in 2015, he was found guilty of criminal breach of trust, after the second longest trial in Singapore's history. Kong was sentenced to serve 8 years in prison, but this was subsequently lowered to 3.5 years. Number 4. In 1987, Hogan Fukunaga attended a spiritual event during which he had the stunning revelation that he was, in fact, the reincarnation of Jesus Christ and the Buddha. This prompted him to found the Ho no Hana sect, recruiting members by claiming he would diagnose any physical or spiritual problems that they may have had by reading their feet, much like the fortune-telling abilities that palm readers claim to have. Foot readings would cost congregation members up to 100,000 yen or $900, where they would be told that their current problems would only worsen exponentially. This could, however, be avoided if the congregation member were to attend a cult seminar, which would cost them 2.25 million yen, or about $20,000, or if they donated a similar amount, or up to 14 million yen, or about $127,000 to his sect. To help the cause, scrolls and ornaments were also for sale, which Fukunaga claimed could break curses, cure diseases, and banish evil from people's lives. Members of the sect were told to recruit new members at any cost, even being told that lying was acceptable, as the new recruit would learn the real truth once they were part of the congregation. Fukunaga would often be seen wearing expensive suits and custom-made shoes, while his wife was known to spend up to $7,000 a month on shopping. He would also use the funds to organize meetings with influential leaders, such as Pope John Paul II, former President Bill Clinton, former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and many other celebrities. After an investigation by Japanese police, it was found that Fukunaga had swindled up to 81 billion yen from his followers, and he received a sentence of 12 years in prison. Following his arrest and conviction, Fukunaga still claimed that he had done nothing wrong and that he'd only delivered the voice of God. Number 3. When son Myung Moon was 15 years old, he claimed he was told by Jesus that he was selected to carry out a mission on Earth, and that he was to travel to America and Japan from Korea in order to let the world know about the greatness of the people of Korea. He claimed that he was also told he was to become the parent of all of humanity. So once he had graduated from middle school in 1941, he did just that, and he moved to Japan, where he studied electrical engineering. Upon completing his studies, he moved back to Korea, where he started preaching and attempting to recruit members for his church. This caught the attention of authorities, and he was arrested under suspicion of being a spy for the South Korean government, receiving a 5-year sentence in a labor camp. Moon claims that thanks to the start of the Korean War, the prison walls fell and he was able to escape back to South Korea. Here, he founded the Unification Church, selling tools and machine parts to fund his sect. They soon branched out to construction and selling weapons, quickly growing his business empire. By 1971, Moon had relocated to the US, where he created the International Conference on the Unity of Sciences, which comprised of various scientific conferences. At the first of these conferences, only 20 people attended, but by 1982, a conference of Seoul would see attendance of over 800 people. In 1981, the Washington Times was created by News World Communications, which had close ties to Moon, who by 2002 had already invested $1.7 million into the newspaper. Moon would often refer to the Washington Times as the, quote, instrument in spreading the truth about God to the world. The following year, in 1982, Moon was convicted in the federal district court in Manhattan after he failed to disclose an income of $162,000 on his tax returns. He filed for an appeal against the sentence of 18 months in jail and a fine of $15,000, but this was rejected by the United States Supreme Court. He ended up serving 13 months in jail, where he worked as a kitchen assistant. Number 2. He found a kinship in the socialist and Marxist movements during the Second World War. During the 60s, this would lead him to becoming interested in smaller groups who had ever more radical views, and in the 70s, he would eventually create the LaRouche movement. It was during this time that he would become involved in conspiracy theories and illegal activities. In 1967, he taught at New York City's Free School, where he presented classes on Marxism and materialism. This attracted a group of students from Columbia University and the City College of New York, naming the group the National Caucus of Labor Committees. By 1973, the group had grown to over 600 members who devoted their lives to LaRouche in the belief that they would eventually overthrow the government. In November of that same year, the FBI considered supporting the assassinations of LaRouche, fearing that the LaRouche movement may forcibly take power from the country. Media reports claimed that between April and September of 1973, LaRouche created Operation Mop-Up, during which members of his movement physically attacked leftist group members, with at least 60 assaults being reported to police, but the leader claimed that the attacks were merely cases of self-defense. In 1986, LaRouche's offices in Virginia and Massachusetts were raided by federal officers, and he, along with 12 associates, were indicted on credit card fraud charges as well as obstruction of justice. This, however, led to a mistrial. In 1988, he was indicted once again, along with 6 other members for mail fraud and tax evasion, and he was sent to prison for 15 years, receiving parole after 5. From 1976 to 2004, LaRouche ran as a perennial presidential candidate in every single election. He ran as a candidate of third parties that were established by members of his movement, gaining 5% of the nationwide vote in Democratic primaries in 1996. Number 1. When Kent Hovind was 16 years old, he found God and became a born-again Christian. He was a member of the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, and by 1975, he'd become a teacher and assistant pastor at various Baptist schools, one of which was founded by Hovind himself. He would continue to teach here until 1988. By 1989, he would establish creation science evangelism, which spoke against evolution and taught creationism instead. His son would eventually join the movement, traveling to various venues where he would present arguments and seminars based on his father's teachings. In 1998, Hogan started a website called Dr. Dino, from which he would sell books, videotapes, and fossils, as well as publishing his own articles. This resulted in Hogan giving talks at churches, schools, and on a daily internet radio talk show. The following year, he would merge his movement with the Faith Baptist Fellowship of Hawthorne, Florida, which would last until 2002. 2001 saw the opening of Hogan's Dinosaur Adventureland, a creationist theme park in Pensacola. Visitors to the park were greeted with the slogan, "Where the dinosaurs and Bible meet," and dinosaurs were depicted as coexisting with humans during the last 4,000 to 6,000 years. The park also included a representation of the Loch Ness Monster. In 2003, Glenn Stoll, a well-known tax avoidance scheme promoter, helped Hogan create various business entities associated with the Unregistered Baptist Fellowship, which holds a theology of Christian resistance against civil governments, believing that governmental authorities do not cross the threshold of the church. Hogan has even gone as far as comparing the status of his ministry to that of the Vatican city-state. In 2004, the federal government obtained a search warrant, and a criminal investigator for the IRS swore in a statement that Hogan's organization was operating without a business license, and that it did not have tax-exempt status. This resulted in an investigation, which saw Hogan face 58 felony tax evasion charges in 2006. The following year, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, with 3 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution of more than $600,000 to the federal government. His wife, Jo, was sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison. At his sentencing, Hogan addressed the court and stated that if the IRS wanted only to make money, he knew of thousands of people who would make contributions toward his debt, which would allow him to go free to continue preaching. However, the prosecution was able to produce recordings of discussions between Hogan and his son, where they spoke about hiding property deeds and a vehicle that would be collected by the government in order to pay his debt. A second Dinosaur Adventureland park was opened in Lenox, Alabama in 2018. This was after one of Hogan's supporters donated a 140-acre piece of land to the cause, and volunteers set to work to create the park. Facilities at the new park include campgrounds, four-wheeler facilities, a science center, and church services where followers are baptized if they wish to be. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.